The article mentioned a study of students who were in ESL writing classes that use this material of mobile phones, and the study showed that the students reacted well, that they enjoyed their dialogue journaling that they used on their mobile phones for the class. So the findings of the study is that the potential for student achievement using this material mobile phones is very high. That students have a very high potential for growth in their writing because it's largely because it's highly engaging for the students. So other reasons the article mentioned that using mobile devices is attractive is because of portability, connectivity, and popularity of owning a mobile phone. It indicated that 90% of students under 18 already have a smartphone. So it's definitely a good material that's readily available for most students to use. Also, it was recommended because it involves a lot of independence and ownership of the learning process, and that encourages the students to engage more and learn more independently instead of depending so much on the teacher directly. One connection I made from the article to our class is that this material, the mobile devices, they give students access to interact a lot with their peers or their teacher via written text messages or social applications. So it's really a great material to implement a communicative approach to the students' learning. So that is the main information about the first writing article. And I did find it interesting because I enjoy using technology in the classroom, but I feel like I have so much more to learn. And to be honest, I'm a little apprehensive just because it's somewhat new. I've never had students use their phones in class because it's against the policy at my school. But I think that it relates to what our professor said, that you should not be a rebel, but also think for yourself and use what you know the students enjoy. So it's the huge positive reinforcement to let them use their phone. How incredible would it be if they could use their phone for their own learning instead of always just reprimanding them for using it? So those are my thoughts about that article. The second writing article that I chose is called Lack of University ESL Writing Competence, Identifying Gaps in Academic Writing of ESL Students. And this article was written by someone whose last name is Jiridaharan. So this article mainly discusses the problem that many ESL students are not prepared once they reach the university to meet the rigorous writing demands of the university setting. One problem is that they have a general understanding of grammar rules, but not enough of an understanding of grammar rules to write whole academic papers. And I think this relates back to how grammar should not be taught in isolation, but rather embedded in every activity, be it speaking, reading, listening, or writing related, just consistently ongoing instead of in isolation, because when they're in the university, they have to not just show their grammar skills on a worksheet, but really apply it at a deeper level. So to go back to the main point of this article, it shared about a study that identified critical gaps in ESL university students and their academic writing proficiency. There were very common grammatical, structural, syntactical errors. And the article also discussed how writing is a cognitively very complex task. So the article explained that in the study, they asked students what their perceptions are of academic writing challenges by a feedback form. The results of this feedback form, asking about the students' writing challenges, was the following. Almost 70% did not express writing as enjoyable or express confidence in their grammar abilities. So this reminded me of the importance of motivating our students so that they don't feel discouraged because of how challenging something is, or how challenging writing is. The findings also showed how, related to what I just said, how positive attitudes towards writing is so important because there is a direct relationship between learners' attitudes and learners' motivations. And that's where we are key as teachers in really trying to motivate them to be interested in writing and not daunted by it. So one technique that the article didn't mention but reminded me of it based on what the article discussed was called snowball writing. So students would write, you could put up a prompt, and then students would write their response to the prompt and then crumple that response up, throw it so that it becomes an anonymous activity, and then another student, so that's the snowball element of it, another student picks it up, reads it, responds to it. And the reason that this could be engaging for students to be more involved in writing practice is because of the anonymity of it, and also how it's just different from the more traditional sit down, write your essay kind of thing. It's a lot more creative, free-flowing. You can react to other students' writings, that kind of thing. So that's one technique that occurred to me through reading this article. The article mentioned that techniques involving targeted instruction in vocabulary, grammar, and sentence paragraph structures is important because that's where students were very insecure regarding their writing, and that the students should be exposed to many different types of texts, that they should practice evaluating, and also that they should practice evaluating writing, including their own writing. So after they write, to judge themselves, perhaps based on a rubric or a checklist, which would be some materials that would be helpful. So to sum up this article, it was mainly about how difficult writing is for ESL students at the university level. And lastly, it encouraged a process approach to teaching students. So teaching them that writing is not this pressure on the spot, one-time thing, one-time event, that there's a pre-writing process, a planning, drafting, reflection, peer tutor review, revision, editing, and proofreading steps in this writing process. So there's many opportunities as teachers, very important to give feedback to students throughout the process instead of just at the end once they have their grade. So those are the main points of the second writing article. Lastly, the third writing article that I chose is titled Teaching Writing to Second Language Learners, Insights from Theory and Research by, this author's last name is Barca. I'm just going to say Barca. I'm sure I butchered that person's last name. So this article was a little similar to the article I just discussed because it shared about how challenging it is for ESL students to become proficient writers. The focus of this study was on teaching ESL students at the intermediate and advanced academic writing level strategies to really be successful in their classes. So this article, just reviewing my notes, discussed different techniques that you can use to support students. One is text focus. So it familiarizes students with different text types The other is process focused, which is how I described in the last writing article about the whole process and the steps involved in writing, so that no one ultimatum type of task is daunting for students, but rather broken down into strategic steps. And then also techniques involving sociocultural learning. So students would learn the genres in a certain culture, the values, and the practices of the target community, the intended audience for the writing. So the whole sociocultural context of written work. Okay. The study mentioned details about the challenges ESL students face, including lengthy texts, sophisticated vocabulary, and syntactic structures that are also very complicated, varying patterns of text organization as well. So the article emphasized that students need many opportunities to practice all these skills that relate to writing proficiency. One connection I made to the class through reading this article, because another point that was mentioned is that you need to be explicit as a teacher about the purpose or the goal of the writing task. So students need to know, I'm writing this to persuade my reader to consider my point of view, to inform my reader, to entertain my reader, that it really needs to be purpose driven. Also, something the article mentioned that relates to class is the importance of student choice. That students need to have a voice, have their voice listened to regarding perhaps what they write about, how they write about it, things like that to increase motivation, since let's remember the studies are showing how extremely challenging and daunting it is for ESL students. A recommendation this article gave was to motivate students by having them discuss their beliefs about writing and help them hopefully develop more positive beliefs about it. And just encouraging students to see themselves as writers and not as students, to keep high expectations of them, and to promote learner self-assessment. So this reminds me of the practicality of using rubrics, checklists, revision and editing checklists, all that, so that they can develop self-correction strategies. Some techniques that occurred to me, and that some were also mentioned in this article, are to, before engaging in the specific writing task, to read a model text with students so that they see and analyze an example of the writing that they will later produce, and to really delve into whatever the model text is by looking at the context, the intended audience, the intended purpose, all these deeper level aspects of text. So also, lastly, a technique that was recommended is giving constructive feedback live during class. So you can put under the document camera, put up on the screen in front of class a paper of one of the students, and go think aloud and go through their writing with the class to discuss 1 or 2 points that you want the whole class to work on. Things like that, evaluating their writing throughout the process instead of at the very end. Also having teacher-student conferences that are student-led was recommended, and I agree could be very powerful, and relates to communicative learning. So lastly, it recommended reflective writing, where students reflect on their own progress in their writing, to make goals for their next writing task, and to just really assess how they're progressing. So I am wrapping up with that, my last summary of the last writing article. Thank you for listening.